so get ready for this one, because
Oh,
today we're going to be asking a pretty wild what-if question. What if the Americas were, like, never even discovered by Europeans?
Hmm.
And we're going to be going deep on this topic.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, so we're going to be, like, looking at a book that goes into this whole alternate history scenario. And we're going to be, like, exploring all the ripple effects. So from, like, the environment and how different it would be to, like, the cultures that would develop, and then all the way to the economics and politics of the world. I mean, think about it. How different would the world be today if the Americas were never discovered by Europeans?
Yeah, it's a pretty mind-blowing concept to think about.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
it really makes you question, like, everything you thought you knew about history and how things turned out.
Totally.
And, like, what's really inevitable versus, what could have been totally different.
Exactly.
Like, we take for granted, like, so much of how the world is structured today.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, in this alternate reality, things could be completely different.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So let's jump into this thing, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Let's start with the environment, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the book paints this picture of the Americas in 2025. And it's like this totally untouched paradise,
Wow.
right? Like, imagine forests that just stretch, like, unbroken from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific coast.
Wow.
And then you've got the Great Plains just teeming with bison.
Yeah.
Wolves and bears are just roaming around like it's no big deal. It's like stepping back in time.
It's like a completely different planet, almost.
Yeah, right.
Like, when you think about all the environmental challenges we're facing today,
Mhm.
like climate change, deforestation, pollution, it really makes you wonder, like, what could have been different?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, what if we'd taken a different path?
Mhm.
Maybe one that was more in balance with nature.
Yeah, and not only that, but think about, like, the species that went extinct. In our timeline, I mean. Like,
Yeah.
the passenger pigeon, for example. Like, there were so many of them that they would, like, darken the skies when they flew overhead.
Wow, I had no idea.
I know, right? But in this alternate world, they'd still be around, along with, like, the Carolina parakeet. And
Yeah.
who knows how many other species that we lost.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes you think about, like, the fragility of ecosystems
Mm-hmm.
and how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, like one small change can have these huge ripple effects.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's imagine that within this, like, pristine environment, we have indigenous societies, right? And they're flourishing because there's no colonization to, like, wipe them out or disrupt their way of life.
Right.
So, for example, the book talks about the Iroquois Confederacy and how they might have actually expanded their influence even further, maybe even, like, refining their democratic principles, like, centuries earlier than Europe.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And then there's, like, the Mississippians. They were known for building these incredible mound cities.
Yeah?
And then you've got the ancestral Pueblones with their amazing cliff dwellings and their knowledge of astronomy. So, like, who knows what kind of technologies they might have developed,
All right.
especially, like, in harmony with their environment. Like, not the kind of technology that, like, exploits and pollutes, but something, like, totally different.
Yeah, like a more sustainable path of development.
Exactly. And, when you compare that to, like, the Industrial Revolution that we had in our timeline, which was, like, driven by European powers and,
Yeah.
it's just really interesting to think about, like, what would progress have looked like if it hadn't been for that particular path?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if maybe there was a different way, a way that didn't involve, like, mass production and fossil fuels.
Right, like a different way of relating to the world.
Exactly.
All right, so we've got this, like, untouched nature and these, like, thriving indigenous societies. Now let's zoom out a little bit and look at the global picture, all right? Because here's the thing. Without the Americas' resources, European powers probably wouldn't have risen to, like, global dominance.
Right.
Like, think about it. They wouldn't have had access to all the gold and silver or the land to grow crops like tobacco and sugar. So they wouldn't have had, like, the wealth and the power to build these huge empires
Yeah.
and to colonize, like, so much of the world.
That's a really interesting point. Like, the whole balance of power would have been totally different.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, imagine a world where the Silk Road, the one connecting East and West, like, that was still the main artery for trade and cultural exchange. And, like, Europe and Asia, they're more closely connected.
Right.
And you wouldn't have, like, one single superpower dominating everything.
Yeah, it would be like a multipolar world, right? With different centers of power and influence.
Exactly.
So what do you think, like, how would that have affected global trade and diplomacy and even the potential for conflict?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say for sure. Like human nature is what it is, right? There's always going to be competition and conflict.
Yeah.
But, maybe in this multipolar world, diplomacy would have played a bigger role. Like countries would have been forced to cooperate more because no one power could just like dictate everything.
Right. Like they'd have to negotiate and find common ground. But wouldn't there be like new challenges too? Like without a global power like the United States to kind of like act as a stabilizing force?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like how would global challenges like climate change or like pandemics, how would those be addressed in this kind of multipolar world?
Right. Exactly.
It makes you wonder if, maybe we'd see more regional cooperation.
Yeah.
Or maybe it'd be like every country for themselves.
I don't know.
It's hard to say.
Okay, so let's talk about the global economy for a second, because I'm really curious about this. Like, without the economic dominance of the West, could Africa have played a more prominent role?
Oh, definitely. Like Africa has so much in terms of resources and potential. It's just that historically they've been exploited by other powers.
Yeah.
But in this alternate reality, who knows? Maybe they would have been able to develop their own economies and become a major force on the world stage.
That's a really cool thought, like a totally different global economic order.
Right. It's mind-blowing to think about all the possibilities.
This is crazy. This deep dive is already like making me question everything I thought I knew about history. Like it's really blowing my mind.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
So let's shift gears for a second and talk about how this alternate reality might have like shaped the world's cultural landscape. Because things would look and sound pretty different without the influence of American culture, as we know it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, no Hollywood movies, no pop music, no blue jeans.
It's hard to imagine.
I know, right? It's like trying to picture a world without pizza. It's almost impossible. But seriously, like, what would fill that void? What would people be watching, listening to, wearing?
Well, the book suggests that European classical traditions might have held more sway.
Okay.
And there might have been a greater appreciation for, like, Asian art forms.
Like, what kind of art forms are we talking about here?
Well, like Chinese opera, for example. Or Japanese woodblock prints.
Oh, wow.
Like, imagine those setting the standard for artistic expression. Yeah, it's fascinating to think about how all these different cultural influences might have, like, blended and evolved.
So instead of, like, Hollywood blockbusters, we might be watching, like, epic historical dramas from China. Or, like, Bollywood musicals from India.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Like a whole different world of entertainment.
So tell me, would we all be listening to K-pop?
Maybe. Or maybe traditional folk music from all over the world would have a much wider reach.
Yeah, like instead of being like niche genres,
right,
they would be like mainstream.
It's interesting to think about how musical traditions might have like blended and innovated, without the overwhelming influence of American music.
Yeah, like could we have seen entirely new genres emerge?
Whoa, absolutely. Like fusing elements from different parts of the world.
That would be so cool. Okay, so let's talk about technology for a minute.
Right.
Because without Silicon Valley, like the digital revolution as we know it, it might have taken a very different path.
Yeah, for sure.
Like our smartphones, social media, the internet.
It could all be completely different.
Or like maybe it wouldn't have even happened at all, at least not in the same way.
Right. It's really intriguing to think about, like, how the absence of those American tech giants might have spurred innovation in other parts of the world.
So, like, could China have become the global leader in technology?
It's definitely possible.
Or maybe there would have been, like, a more decentralized approach, like a more collaborative approach to technological development.
Yeah, like instead of these huge corporations controlling everything.
Right, exactly.
It could have been more like open source and community driven.
This is so crazy. This alternate reality is like making me realize just how much we take for granted. Like in our own world.
Yeah, it's like a whole different lens to look through.
It's like looking through a kaleidoscope. Every time you twist it, you see a different pattern.
I like that analogy.
So one thing that's always fascinated me about alternate history is like how it makes you think about individual lives. Like how would our own experiences be different in this world without America?
Yeah, that's a really thought-provoking question. Like trying to picture ourselves in a world that's so profoundly different from our own.
Right. Like it really highlights how much of who we are is shaped by the world around us.
Cool.
Like, for instance, imagine a world without the internet,
Mm-hmm.
like as we know it. Would you be reading a physical book right now instead of like scrolling through articles online?
Maybe.
Or maybe there would be like some entirely new form of communication or entertainment, like something we can't even conceive of.
It's mind-boggling.
And think about like the skills and knowledge
Yeah.
that you've acquired throughout your life. Like, would those same skills be valuable in this alternate world?
That's a good question.
Or would you have pursued like different passions, different careers based on like the unique opportunities and challenges of this reality?
Yeah, like maybe I wouldn't even be a historian in this world.
Right. Like, what would you be doing?
Who knows?
It's a fascinating exercise in self-reflection, isn't it?
It really is.
Like, in this world without America, what unique contributions might you have made? What hidden talents or passions might have flourished?
That's a tough one.
I know, right?
Like maybe I'd be a master craftsman, renowned for my skill in woodworking or metalwork.
Oh, that's cool.
Or maybe I'd be a respected scholar, studying ancient texts in a bustling library in Timbuktu or Nanjing.
Wow. The possibilities are endless.
They really are.
This deep dive has been like a real eye-opener for me. It's shown me how interconnected our world is and how even seemingly small changes can have this like butterfly effect,
Right.
leading to dramatically different outcomes.
Yeah, it's a reminder that history is not like this fixed linear narrative.
Right.
It's more like a tapestry woven from countless threads, choices, events, influences, all interacting in complex and unpredictable ways.
I like that. A tapestry. So as we kind of wrap up this exploration of a world without America, I'm left with this sense of wonder and a renewed appreciation for the complexity of our own reality. It's been a wild ride, and I can't wait to see what other alternate realities we'll be diving into next. But before we go, there's one final thought I want to leave you with.
Okay, I'm listening.
We've explored this world without America, like the untouched landscapes, the thriving indigenous empires, the shifted global power dynamics, the different cultural scene. But what does it all mean for us, for you listening right now? How might your life be different in this alternate reality?
Wow, that's a big question.
It is, right?
Like trying to picture ourselves in a world that's so different from our own.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge.
It is.
But it's also really exciting.
It is exciting.
Like it makes you realize that there are so many possibilities, so many different ways that things could have turned out. And it makes you appreciate the world we live in even more.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into a world without America. Make sure to tune in next time for part 2, where we'll be exploring even more of the fascinating possibilities of this alternate reality. See you then.
See ya. Yeah, it really is mind-boggling, isn't it, to try and imagine a world without, like, all those things we just take for granted.
Totally.
Like, even just, like, everyday stuff. Like, what would people be wearing if there were no blue jeans?
Right. Like, what would be the fashion?
Yeah.
What would be cool?
Exactly. Well, the book talks a bit about that, actually. It suggests that maybe European classical traditions would be more dominant.
Okay.
Like, think about, like, more formal wear. And a lot of emphasis on, like, tailoring and craftsmanship.
Interesting.
And then on the other hand, there could also be, like, a greater appreciation for Asian art forms and aesthetics.
Well, like, what kind of stuff are we talking about here?
Well, like textiles, for example. Like, imagine intricate silks and embroideries from China and Japan.
Oh.
And, like, different draping styles, inspired by traditional garments from India and Southeast Asia.
That's a cool thought. Like a fusion of all these different cultural influences.
Exactly. It would be like a whole new world of fashion.
I wonder if people would still be into, like, vintage clothing.
That's a good question. Like, would there even be a concept of vintage if the fashion landscape was so different?
Right.
Like, maybe people would be collecting and trading garments from different regions of the world.
Oh, yeah. Like, instead of, like, scouring thrift stores for old band T-shirts, they'd be looking for, like, rare kimonos or something.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Okay, now I got to ask you about technology.
Okay, shoot.
So, in this world without America, like, is there even a digital revolution?
Well, that's a big question. And the book kind of leaves it open to interpretation.
Okay.
But it does suggest that things would have evolved very differently.
Like, how so?
Well, for one thing, there wouldn't be Silicon Valley. So the whole culture of, like, startups and venture capital, like, that probably wouldn't have taken off in the same way.
So does that mean, like, no smartphones?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely possible that the development of personal computing devices would have taken a different path.
Like, maybe instead of these, like, pocket-sized supercomputers,
Yeah.
we'd have something completely different.
Right. Like maybe something more focused on, like, specific tasks or integrated into our environment in a different way. It's really interesting to think
You
about.
go with the internet.
Well, the internet as we know it, like that's very much a product of American innovation.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that other countries wouldn't have developed their own networks.
Okay.
Like imagine a world where China's internet infrastructure was the most advanced.
Wow.
Or maybe there would have been like a more decentralized network.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, instead of having like a few big tech companies controlling everything,
Mm-hmm.
there could have been like a network of smaller interconnected networks.
Yep.
Run by like universities, research institutions, and communities.
Interesting.
Like a more collaborative approach to information sharing.
So instead of like Google and Facebook, you
Yeah.
have something totally different.
Exactly.
Man, this is making my head spin.
I know, right? It's a lot to wrap your mind around.
It really is, but I love it.
Me too.
Okay, so we've talked about the environment, indigenous societies,
Yeah.
global politics, economics, and even technology. So I want to shift gears a little bit now and talk about something a little more personal.
Okay.
Because, one of the things that always fascinates me about alternate history is how it makes you think about your own life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, how would things be different for us as individuals if the world had unfolded in this completely different way?
It's a really interesting thought experiment. Like trying to imagine ourselves in the shoes of someone who grew up in this alternate reality.
Right.
Like, what would our values be? What languages would we speak? What kind of jobs would we have?
Yeah, like, would we even be doing the same things? I mean, think about it. In this world without America, our families, our careers, our whole identities.
They could be completely different.
It's like trying to imagine yourself as a character in a different novel.
Yeah, I like that. Like the same soul,
Yeah.
but a different story.
Exactly.
And it really makes you appreciate the power of circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
Like how much of who we are
Mm-hmm.
is shaped by the world around us.
So in this world without America, who do you think you would be?
That's a tough one.
I know, right?
It's hard to say
Yeah.
because so much of my life has been influenced by like American culture and education.
Yeah.
But maybe I would have been a scholar, studying ancient texts in a library somewhere.
That's cool.
Yeah, or maybe I would have been a musician, playing traditional instruments from a different part of the world.
That's awesome.
Okay.
What about you? What do you think you would be doing?
Honestly, I have no idea. But it's fun to think about, isn't it?
It is.
Like it opens up all these possibilities.
And it makes you realize that, like,
Yeah.
the future isn't set in stone. Like, there are so many different paths that our lives could take.
And that's kind of empowering, don't you think?
Yeah, totally.
Like we have the power to shape our own destinies.
All right, so as we wrap up this part or deep dive, I'm left with this feeling of, like, awe and wonder.
Yeah, me too.
Like, this alternate reality, it's so different from our own, but it's also, like, strangely familiar in a way.
I know what you mean.
Like, it makes you realize that we're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
And that even though our cultures and histories may be different,
Yeah.
we all share this common human experience.
Absolutely.
So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue our exploration of this world without America.
Sounds good. It really is a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But it's also kind of fun to think about.
Oh, definitely.
Like, it's like a mental puzzle.
Right.
So, for instance,
Uh,
imagine a world without the internet as we know it. Would you be reading a physical book right now instead of, like, browsing the web?
I could see that. Or maybe there would be like some entirely new form of communication or entertainment, something we can't even imagine.
Right.
Because it would have developed completely independently.
Yeah. And think about, like, the skills and knowledge you've acquired throughout your life. Would those same skills be valuable in this alternate world?
That's a good question. I mean, some of them probably, but others might be completely obsolete.
Right.
Like, for example, my knowledge of like 20th century American history.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be very useful in a world where America never existed.
Exactly. So in this world without America, what unique contributions might you have made? What hidden talents or passions might have flourished?
Oh, that's tough to say.
I know, right?
It's like trying to look into an alternate version of yourself.
Yeah.
But, maybe I would have been a craftsman, like a woodworker or a blacksmith.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Or maybe I would have been a musician, playing some kind of traditional instrument,
That's all.
like something we've never even heard of.
Yeah. I love that image. This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the power of perspective.
Me too.
It's made me realize that our own reality is just one of countless possible worlds.
Exactly.
Each with its own unique set of challenges and opportunities.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
About what might have been.
Yeah.
And what still could be.
It's exciting and a little bit scary at the same time.
I know, right? Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this episode.
Okay.
We've explored a lot of ground today.
We have.
And I hope it's given you all something to think about. So thank you for joining us on this journey into an alternate reality.
Yeah.
And until next time, keep exploring.
And keep questioning.
And keep diving deep.